The snow was already ankle-deep when Travis Sloane pushed his rusty old shovel into the icy driveway of the Blue Craftsman house at the end of the cul-de-sac, teeth chattering, boots soaked, and his 6-year-old daughter's 2 small gloves stretched over his freezing fingers. "Dad, are you sure this is okay?" Harper asked from the curb, her voice muffled by the pink scarf wrapped around her mouth. He glanced back at her, sitting wrapped in layers of hand-me-down winter gear on an old plastic sled with a thermos of cocoa. "Yeah, baby. Just one more driveway, then we'll go home and make pancakes." Travis hadn't planned on shoveling a stranger's driveway that morning, but when he passed the house and saw the untouched snow, something tugged at him. Maybe it was the way the wind had buried the front steps, or the fact the mailbox was still overflowing. Or maybe it was just the electricity bill burning a hole in his back pocket. Either way, he knocked no answer. So, he figured maybe the people inside were older, or out of town, or just needed a hand. He wasn't expecting anything in return. He was just trying to be decent. What he didn't know was that the woman who owned the house wasn't just anyone. She was the CEO of a luxury real estate empire, and she was currently watching him from the front window. Fiona Fairchild stood behind the curtain, coffee mug in hand, still in her silk pajama pants and hoodie, staring through the glass at the tall man shoveling her driveway like his life depended on it. He didn't know her. He wasn't doing it for money, she could tell. There was something about the way he moved, focused and fast, like he was used to pushing through exhaustion. Her breath caught when he lifted his head. Even from behind the glass, she could see the tired lines on his face, the stubble on his jaw, the way his eyes flicked back to the little girl on the curb every few minutes. Protective. Alert. She exhaled slowly. "What are you doing, Fiona?" she whispered to herself, setting the mug down. Then she grabbed her coat. By the time she stepped outside, he was nearly done, sweat dripping down his neck despite the cold. She cleared her throat. He turned, startled. "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to bother you. I thought maybe you weren't home." Fiona crossed her arms, studying him. "You shoveled my entire driveway." He gave her a sheepish shrug. "Yeah, I guess I did." "Why?" He hesitated, then nodded toward Harper. "Just trying to pick up some odd jobs. Things have been tight." Fiona looked over at the little girl, who was now waving at her with a cocoa-stained mitten. She smiled softly. "She's yours?" "Yeah." "Harper." "She's 6. I'm Travis." "Fiona," she replied. "She's cute." "She's everything," he said simply. Fiona paused. "Come inside. Warm up, both of you." Travis blinked. "Oh, no, really, we're okay. I didn't mean to, I insist," she said. "At least let me give you some breakfast." Harper perked up immediately. "Did she say breakfast?" Travis groaned. "Harper." Fiona laughed. "Come on. I make a mean French toast." Honestly, Travis hadn't been inside a house like that in years. The entryway alone felt like something out of a magazine. Clean lines. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A fireplace already lit, warm and crackling. Harper immediately kicked off her boots and ran toward the scent of cinnamon. Fiona handed Travis a towel. "You look like you've been out here for days." He ran it over his hair. "Feels like it." She poured 3 mugs of coffee and handed him one. "So, do you always shovel random driveways?" He chuckled. "Only when I'm desperate." She raised an eyebrow. "My work dried up the past few months. I used to do construction. Then Harper's mom left, and it's been just me. I pick up what I can. Shoveling, fixing fences, painting, whatever." He took a sip. "Didn't realize you were home. Hope I didn't freak you out." Fiona leaned against the counter. "Honestly? I thought you were robbing me at first." He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "That bad, huh? You looked determined. And cold. I figured worst-case scenario, I'd hit you with a broom." He grinned, and for a moment, she forgot she was supposed to be on a conference call in 20 minutes. They sat down to breakfast. Harper talked Fiona's ear off about her favorite cartoons, and Fiona listened like she had all the time in the world. When Travis offered to wash the dishes, Fiona waved him off. "You've done enough." He hesitated, then pulled out his wallet. "I feel weird just taking food." "No," she interrupted. "This isn't charity. It's kindness, which you already gave me this morning." Their eyes held for a beat too long. "I should go," he said, standing. "Thanks again. For everything." "I owe you, remember?" she said, walking them to the door. "You saved my driveway." He smiled, adjusting Harper's scarf. "Well, if you ever need a guy with a shovel again, you know where to find me." She watched them walk down the driveway. Harper turned around and waved. Fiona waved back, her smile lingering long after they were gone. That night, Travis sat at the kitchen table of their tiny apartment while Harper colored beside him. He couldn't stop thinking about Fiona. The way she moved, the calm confidence in her voice, the way she treated Harper like she wasn't just a kid, but someone important. And he had no idea that Fiona Fairchild, who had just shared her breakfast table with him, owned half the buildings in the city, or that she was already looking up his name. Not because she was suspicious, but because she couldn't stop thinking about him either. 3 days later, Fiona found herself lingering outside her office window, distracted by falling snow that dusted the skyline like powdered sugar. Her assistant, Lexi, tapped nervously on the glass door. "Your meeting with the development board starts in 5 minutes." Fiona turned, blinking as if waking from a dream. "Push it. Half an hour." Lexi hesitated. "They're already in the conference room." "I said push it." The door clicked shut behind her, and Fiona sank into her chair. She hated mornings like this, when the city felt cold in more ways than one, and even the warmth of her penthouse wasn't enough to cut through it. She hadn't stopped thinking about Travis. It wasn't just the way he'd looked at Harper like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. It wasn't even the way he carried himself, quiet strength, no arrogance, no expectation. It was the moment he handed her that wrinkled $20 bill to pay for breakfast he hadn't asked for. A single, silent act that had said more than any conversation could. And now she couldn't stop wondering who he was when he wasn't shoveling snow. She opened a file on her desk. A background report minimal, just employment history and address. It hadn't been hard to find. The city wasn't that big. No criminal record, no red flags. He'd worked for a small contractor that had gone under last year. Single father. No legal custody, dispute filed. No red tape. It made her stomach twist a little that she'd even looked him up. But she was used to people hiding motives behind kind gestures. She wasn't willing to be wrong again. Still, something about Travis didn't fit the mold. She closed the file, stood, and grabbed her coat. On the other side of town, Travis was patching drywall in a rental house for a landlord who'd promised to pay under the table. The place smelled like old carpet and mildew, and his hands were raw from sanding. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he wiped it on his jeans before answering. "Yeah, Dad, you forgot my lunch." He closed his eyes. "Harper, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I'm not mad. Miss Carla said I could have a sandwich, but she said to tell you. I'll bring you something special after work, okay? Extra peanut butter." She giggled. "Don't forget the jelly this time." He smiled. "I won't." After he hung up, he leaned against the wall, letting out a long breath. It was the 3rd time this month he'd forgotten something for school. He hated how much slipped through the cracks these days. As he stood there, the door creaked open behind him. The landlord poked his head in. "You got a visitor." Travis frowned and stepped into the hallway. Fiona stood by the front door, out of place in her camel wool coat, her heels tapping against the warped linoleum. He wiped his hands on a rag. "What are you doing here?" She glanced around. "I wasn't sure this address was right." "It's not what I expected." It's not my place, he said quickly. I'm just doing some patchwork. She looked at the cracked ceiling, the peeling trim. You do remodeling? I do what pays. She tilted her head slightly. You've got drywall dust in your hair. He ran a hand through it, wincing.
Yeah.
It gets everywhere. I came to ask you something, she said, stepping closer. He raised an eyebrow. Am I in trouble?
No, she said.
I need a favor. He crossed his arms, curious. From me? She nodded. I have a property upstate. A big one. It was supposed to be renovated last year, but the crew bailed halfway through. I'm trying to sell it, but no one wants to touch it until it's finished. And you want me to fix it? I want you to manage the crew. Oversee the work. Maybe even bring in some people you trust.
I'll pay.
Well. He blinked. Why me? She didn't look away. Because you showed up when no one asked you to. And because you didn't take advantage when you could have. He hesitated. How far upstate? 2 hours. I'd cover travel, housing, and bring Harper up on weekends if you want. He ran a hand over his jaw. You're serious. I don't make jokes about real estate. He looked around, then back at her. I'd need time to figure out school stuff and childcare. She gave a small nod. I can help with that. Why are you doing this? Fiona met his eyes. Because I think people deserve chances when they've earned them. He glanced down at his dust-covered boots. And if I say no, then I'll find someone else. Her voice was steady, but there was something in her eyes, disappointment, maybe. But I'll be hoping you don't. He gave a low chuckle. You always this persuasive? Only when it matters. He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between them, quiet but full. Okay, he finally said. I'll do it. But I want to do it right. My way. She extended her hand. Agreed. He shook it, her skin warm against his calloused palm. As she turned to leave, she paused. Harper likes marshmallows in her cocoa. 3. No more, no less. He chuckled. She told you that? She was very specific. He watched her walk out, and for the first time in months, something shifted in his chest. A sliver of possibility. Of hope. The next morning, Fiona leaned against the hood of her Bentley, parked outside the red brick elementary school. She was early. She always was. But this time, she wasn't here for a meeting. When Harper came out, her backpack bouncing against her coat, she stopped short when she saw Fiona waiting. Hi, Harper said, confused. Fiona smiled. I brought you something. She held out a small paper bag. Inside was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, apple slices, and 3 marshmallows in a plastic cup. Harper's face lit up. Daddy forgot again, didn't he? He's been busy, Fiona said gently. But he said to tell you he's sorry. Harper took the bag carefully. You're nice. I try. She sat on the bench beside Harper while she ate. The wind tugged at Fiona's scarf, and she watched the children play on the far side of the playground. Are you going to marry my dad? Fiona blinked. What? Harper shrugged. You brought food. That's usually a sign. Fiona laughed, a real laugh, the kind that surprised even her. I think we're a long way from that. Harper nodded, thoughtful. You'd be a good mom? Fiona's chest tightened. Thank you. When Travis arrived minutes later, his eyes widened at the sight of them together. I didn't mean to make you feel responsible, you didn't, Fiona interrupted. I wanted to. He looked at Harper, who was licking jelly off her fingers. She likes you. I like her too. They stood in the fading sunlight, something unspoken stretching between them. Not quite friendship, not yet love, but something real. Travis reached for Harper's hand. We should head home. Fiona nodded. See you tomorrow? He hesitated. Yeah, tomorrow. As they walked away, Harper looked up at him. She's not like the other ladies. Travis glanced back at Fiona. No, he said softly. She's not. The property was massive. Old stone walls stretched across the snow-covered land, leading to a sprawling estate that looked more like a forgotten castle than a fixer-upper. The house was 3 stories tall, with ivy frozen against the stone exterior and turrets that hadn't seen attention in decades. A cracked fountain sat in the center of the circular drive, half buried in snow. Travis stepped out of Fiona's SUV, boots crunching against the packed ice, and took it all in with a low exhale. You didn't mention it was this big, he said. Fiona pulled her coat tighter. I didn't want to scare you off. He turned to her. This isn't a renovation. This is a resurrection. I'm aware, she said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. But it has potential. He walked to the front steps, testing the wood. It's got rot. Mold too, probably. Most likely. Travis looked back at her. And you want it done in what, 6 weeks? 4, she said, her tone calm as ever. He laughed, shaking his head. You're serious? I am. The buyer from France is coming to see it by the end of next month. If it's not ready, the deal falls through. Travis stared at the estate again, hands on his hips. You're asking for a miracle. Fiona stepped beside him. I'm asking for someone who doesn't cut corners and won't flinch when things get ugly. And what makes you think that's me? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out over the snow-covered grounds. Because you showed up when no one else did. And because you keep showing up. Inside, the house was freezing. Dust hung in the air like mist, and the wooden floors creaked with every step. Travis walked through the foyer, his breath visible in the cold. The chandelier overhead was missing 2 arms, and the stairs looked like they might collapse under weight. This place isn't just neglected, he said, shining a flashlight down the hall. It's angry. Fiona followed him through the main corridor. It belonged to my grandfather. He bought it for my grandmother as a wedding gift. They used to come here in the summers when she was still alive. Travis paused, glancing back. Why sell it now? She hesitated. Because holding on to something doesn't always mean keeping it. He didn't ask more. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward, it was heavy with understanding. Over the next week, he assembled a small crew guys he'd worked with before, men who didn't ask questions and didn't mind getting their hands dirty. Fiona arranged housing at a nearby inn, and Travis moved Harper into a cozy upstairs room with a fireplace and a view of the woods. She was thrilled. Every night, she made tiny paper snowflakes and taped them to the window. Travis worked from dawn until well after dark. Fiona came up on weekends, sometimes bringing Harper new books or puzzles, other times just walking the grounds with a clipboard and a thermos of tea. She didn't hover, but she was always present. One afternoon, while Travis was reinforcing the second-floor beams, she climbed the ladder beside him, ignoring the warnings from his crew. You're going to fall in those boots, he said. I've survived worse, she replied, handing him a sandwich wrapped in foil. You forgot lunch. He wiped his hands on a rag before taking it. You don't have to keep doing this. I know. They sat on the floorboards, legs dangling over the edge, looking out through the open framework toward the distant tree line. You always this hands-on with your properties? He asked. No, she said. But this one's different. He bit into the sandwich, chewing slowly. You could have sold it as is. Someone would have bought it for the land alone. It's not about money, she said, then caught herself. Not entirely. He waited. I need to prove something, she admitted, eyes on the horizon. To myself. That I can finish what I start. That not everything I touch ends up hollow. You really think that about yourself? She didn't answer. Travis finished the sandwich, then leaned back on his hands. You know, you talk like someone who's been hurt but pretends they haven't. She gave a dry laugh. It's easier to control the narrative if you're the one writing it. He looked at her, studying the profile of her face in the fading light. "You don't have to do that with me." "I know," she said quietly. "That's what scares me." That night, Fiona stayed in the guest room near Harper's. The innkeeper had only one suite left, and Fiona insisted on giving Travis and Harper the larger room. He protested, of course, but she overruled him with a single look. Later, as snow fell softly outside the window, Fiona sat in the reading nook beneath a thick blanket, sipping red wine from a chipped mug. She heard Harper's laughter echo from the next room, followed by Travis's deeper chuckle. She closed her eyes, letting the sound settle inside her like warmth from a fire. The next morning, Travis found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, scrambling eggs in a cast-iron skillet. "Since when do CEOs make breakfast?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. She didn't look up. "Since their conscience kept them up all night." He stepped closer. "Something wrong?" "I haven't stopped working in over a decade," she said, her voice low. "Not really. Not once. And for the first time, I don't want to check my messages. I don't care what meetings I missed." "And that scares you?" "It terrifies me." He poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed her one. "You think that means something's wrong, but maybe it means something's finally right." She took the mug, fingers brushing his. "You always talk like that." "Only when I'm running on 4 hours of sleep." Fiona laughed, then caught herself. He stepped closer. "You don't have to keep your guard up with me. I don't know how to let it down." "Then let me help you." They stood in the soft light of the kitchen, something shifting in the silence between them. But before anything else could be said, Harper burst in. "Can we build a snowman before school?" Fiona smiled. "Of course. But only if you let me name him." Harper gasped. "You're going to name him Harold again, aren't you?" "Absolutely." Travis watched them as they bundled up and headed out into the snow, his chest tight in a way that had nothing to do with cold. Later that week, while inspecting the newly installed window frames, Fiona received a call from her senior partner. She stepped outside to take it, pacing near the edge of the woods. "What do you mean you're pulling the funding?" she whispered, her voice sharp. "We had an agreement," she hissed into the phone. "You don't back out when we're this close to closing." Her pulse thundered in her ears. When she finally hung up, her hands were shaking. Travis had seen her walk off. When she returned, her expression was blank, but her eyes betrayed her. "What happened?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "It's nothing." He took a step forward. "Don't do that." She shook her head. "The buyer's pulling out. Without him, the entire deal collapses. And I don't have the capital to float the rest of the project myself." Travis's jaw tightened. "So that's it?" "No," she said. "I'll find another way. I always do." He looked at her, something dark flashing behind his eyes. "You don't have to do this alone." She stared at him, unsure. "Why do you keep saying that?" "Because I've done alone. For years. And I know what it costs." Her breath caught, and for a moment, the wind between them spoke louder than words. She didn't cry. She didn't fall apart. But she did lean into him. And for the first time since this all began, Fiona Fairchild let someone else hold the weight for a while. The storm rolled in faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, the renovation site was buried under nearly 2 feet of snow, and the mountainside roads had been declared unsafe. Fiona stood at the edge of the estate's ballroom, now stripped of its sagging drapes and dangerously cracked chandelier, and watched the heavy flakes fall in silence. Travis entered behind her, brushing snow from his shoulders. "We're not getting out until Monday at the earliest. County's rerouting plows to the main highway." Fiona didn't turn. "I figured." He stepped closer. "The crew's hunkered down at the inn. Everyone's safe." She nodded but didn't speak. Travis studied her face. "You haven't said much since the call." "There's nothing to say," she said, her voice low. "The buyer's gone. The investor's withdrawn. And I poured everything I had left into this place, Travis. It was supposed to be my redemption." He took a breath. You still have the property. You still have us. I needed the sale, she said, finally turning to him. Without it, I can't cover the losses. The other projects are tied up in legal restrictions. I leveraged this estate to buy time everywhere else. Then we'll find another buyer. It's not that simple. It never is. But that doesn't mean it's over. Fiona shook her head. You don't get it. This wasn't just a business deal. This was the one thing I did for myself. Not for the board. Not for optics. Not because it made sense on paper. I did this because I wanted to believe I could make something beautiful out of the wreckage. Travis stepped forward, slow and certain. You did. She looked up at him, eyes sharp with disbelief. You brought this place back to life. You pulled in a crew in less than a week. You found a way to make it warm again. He gestured around the room. You don't see it yet because you're too close to the broken pieces. But the rest of us? We see what you've built. She exhaled shakily. What if it's not enough? Then we keep going until it is. She stared at him in silence, something cracking beneath the surface. He reached for her hand. You're not alone. Not anymore. She didn't pull away. They stood that way until Harper peeked in from the hall, cheeks flushed from sledding in the yard. The snow's up to the porch swing, she called. Can we make cocoa? Travis turned. I'll be there in a minute. She grinned and disappeared. Fiona watched her go. She doesn't even seem worried. She's got faith, Travis said. Maybe we should borrow some. They joined Harper in the kitchen, where she was already piling marshmallows into mugs. The heat from the stove filled the space with a soft hum, and for a moment, the three of them simply existed. No deadlines, no contracts, no pretense. Just quiet warmth in the middle of a storm. That night, Fiona found herself unable to sleep. The wind howled outside, but it wasn't the storm keeping her awake. It was the way Travis had looked at her. Like, she wasn't just a woman trying to salvage a failed project, but someone worth believing in. She walked downstairs, wrapped in a thick robe, and found Travis by the fireplace, feeding logs into the flames. You always up this late? She asked. He didn't look surprised to see her. Not usually. Just needed to think. She sat across from him, legs curled under her. About what? About what comes next. She rested her chin on her knees. I don't know if I have a next. Yes, you do. The silence that followed was heavier than before, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with possibility neither of them could name yet. Travis leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You asked me once why I keep showing up. I think I finally have the answer. She waited. I've spent the last 6 years trying to keep my head above water. Every day was just about surviving. But then you came along and suddenly I remembered what hope feels like. And not the kind you fake for your kid. The kind that sneaks in when you're not looking. Fiona's throat tightened. I don't care about contracts or buyers or how many zeros are in your bank account. What I care about is how you listen to Harper like she's never been an inconvenience. I care about how you see things other people throw away and still believe they're worth saving. I care about you. She blinked fast. You don't even know everything about me. Then tell me, he said. Tell me the parts you're scared to say out loud. She hesitated, then whispered, I failed my mother. She died before I ever made anything of myself. I worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, and when I finally built something, I became the kind of woman she wouldn't have recognized. I tell myself I'm proud of that. But most days, I don't know who I am without the title. Travis didn't flinch. You're someone who showed up for a stranger in the snow. That tells me everything I need to know. Her eyes burned. You make it sound so simple. It is, he said, when it's real. She crossed the space between them before she could talk herself out of it. He stood as she reached him, and for the first time, there was no hesitation. No guarded words. Just the quiet, undeniable truth of two people who had finally stopped running. When her lips met his, it wasn't tentative. It was inevitable. The next morning, the roads were clear. Fiona loaded the last of Harper's things into the SUV, while Travis secured the final toolbox in the back. Neither of them spoke about what had happened the night before, but something had shifted, something neither of them needed to define just yet. Back in the city, the boardroom was colder than the mountains. Fiona stood at the head of the table, surrounded by skeptical faces. She didn't flinch. "I'm not dissolving the estate," she said. "I'm securing alternate funding and finishing the project." One of the senior partners leaned forward. "With what investors?" She met his gaze. "I've started negotiations with a preservation trust. They're interested in converting the estate into a cultural retreat. It won't be as profitable, but it will be lasting." "And the board?" "I'm not asking for permission. I'm informing you." When she left the meeting, Lexi was waiting by the elevators. "They weren't expecting that," she said. "They never do," Fiona replied. That night, she returned to the old estate, where Travis and Harper were already unpacking a picnic dinner in the ballroom. The floors were polished now, the windows clear, the walls painted a soft, warm gray that caught the light like silk. Fiona stepped onto the floor, heels echoing against the wood. "You two always eat on 100-year-old floors?" Harper grinned. "Only when we're celebrating." She raised an eyebrow. "Celebrating what?" Travis stood, closing the distance between them. "You." She froze as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, hand-carved wooden box. Inside was a simple gold band, no diamonds, no frills. "I didn't buy it to impress you," he said. "I made it. It's not perfect, but it's real." Her breath caught. "Travis, you've spent your whole life proving people wrong. Maybe now it's time to let someone prove you right." Harper stood beside them, practically bouncing. "Say yes." Fiona laughed through her tears. "You're both impossible. And you love us anyway," Travis said. She nodded slowly.
Yes. Ido.
He slipped the ring on her finger. The three of them danced in the empty ballroom. No music, just the sound of their laughter and the wind outside. The estate had been reborn, not as a monument to power, but as the beginning of something better. Something real. And for the first time in her life, Fiona Fairchild didn't feel like a woman pretending to be strong. She felt like she'd finally come home. The estate breathed differently in spring. What once stood as a frozen monument to decay now shimmered with life. Wildflowers had crept up the stone steps, ivy trailed neatly along the walls, and the old fountain now bubbled softly, restored tile glinting in the morning sun. Inside, light poured through the arched windows of the ballroom, casting golden patterns across the polished floor. The house no longer felt like a relic, it felt like a promise. Fiona adjusted the cuff of her pale linen blouse as she stepped into the newly furnished library. Books lined the shelves, now some hers, some donated by the Preservation Trust. A quiet corner had been turned into a reading nook, complete with Harper's beanbag chair and a stack of dog-eared mysteries. Travis stood by the window, holding a clipboard, reading over the final inspection report. His sleeves were rolled up, forearms dusted faintly with sawdust from a last-minute touch-up on the banister. He looked completely at home, like he belonged in every corner of this place. And he did. Final sign-off came through, he said, flipping the page. Structurally sound, compliant on every front. Not a single note. Fiona crossed the room to stand beside him. "You sound surprised." "I'm not," he said, "but I am proud." She leaned lightly against his arm. "We did it." "No," he said. "You did it. I just held the ladder." She turned to face him fully. "You've never just done anything. You held this entire project together when everyone else counted it out. You held me together." "Then maybe," he said, lowering the clipboard, "we held each other." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that no longer needed filling. Outside, Harper's laughter rang out across the garden. She was chasing a kite, its tail fluttering like a ribbon through the blue sky. A volunteer from the Preservation Trust, an older woman named Clara, who'd taken a shine to Harper, sat nearby, sipping lemonade and calling out encouragement. "She's settled in," Fiona said, watching her. "She's never had roots before," Travis said. "Not real ones." "Now she has more than roots," Fiona said. "She has wings." He smiled at that, quiet and full. Later that afternoon, Fiona walked through the North Wing, checking the final exhibit installations. The estate was now officially a cultural retreat and living museum, with curated displays of restored furniture, historical archives, and rotating art from local artists. It was everything she hadn't dared to imagine when she first stepped through its decaying doors. In the dining hall, a long oak table now stretched under chandeliers that had been cleaned and rewired, candles flickering softly above restored silverware and crystal. The first benefit dinner was set for that evening, and every seat had been claimed. As guests arrived, Fiona moved with practiced ease, greeting donors and artists alike, never letting on that her stomach fluttered every time she caught sight of Travis in the crowd, his soup collar slightly crooked as always, that quiet steadiness still anchoring her. He found her near the terrace before dinner began. "Did you see the garden?" he asked.
"I did," she said.
"Who knew you had a green thumb?" "I don't. Harper's the one who convinced the landscaper to let her help plant the rose bushes."
Fiona laughed.
"Of course she did. She also asked if you and I were going to get married this year, or wait until she finishes second grade." Fiona raised her brows. "And what did you say?" "That I hadn't thought that far ahead." She tilted her head. "Is that true?" "No," he said simply. "I think about it every day." The wind tugged gently at the hem of her dress. "Then maybe it's time to stop thinking." He stepped closer. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying," she murmured, "that I've built empires and walked away from them. I've stood in boardrooms and weathered storms, but nothing has ever felt more solid than this us. And I'm ready." Travis didn't hesitate. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple velvet pouch. "Harper found this in my drawer yesterday and told me it was past due." Inside was the same handmade ring. He hadn't replaced it, hadn't upgraded it, because Fiona had never asked him to. And that was love, the kind that didn't need polish to shine.
She didn't wait for him to ask.
She slid the ring back onto her finger and smiled. "This time, we don't need a ceremony to make it real. But I want one anyway." He leaned in, touching his forehead to hers. "Then let's make it unforgettable." They held hands as the doors to the dining hall opened and guests filtered in, unaware that the real celebration wasn't the estate's rebirth, but the quiet triumph of two people who had built something unbreakable. 6 weeks later, the garden was in full bloom. White chairs lined the lawn, soft music drifted from a string quartet, and Harper walked proudly down the aisle, tossing petals into the air with dramatic flair. Fiona stood beneath the arbor in a gown of ivory silk, her hair swept into a loose knot, eyes locked on Travis as he approached. He wore no tie, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled, and a vest that Harper insisted made him look like a movie star who builds castles. Their vows weren't loud. They didn't need to be. "I didn't know what home meant until you," Fiona said. "You made space for me to be messy, to be imperfect, to be real. And you never asked me to shrink to make you feel bigger. You've only ever asked me to be myself. I didn't expect to find you, but I know I'll never let you go." Travis took her hands. "You gave me more than a second chance," he said. "You gave me back the parts of myself I thought I'd lost for good. You believed in me when I didn't. And you let me love you without asking me to prove I was worthy. I'll spend the rest of my life showing you that I am." The guests clapped, but the world around them faded. There was only the kiss and the feeling of finally being exactly where they were meant to be. That night, under a canopy of stars, Fiona and Travis danced barefoot on the lawn while Harper twirled in her flower girl dress, a crown of daisies in her hair. The estate glowed behind them, every window lit, every corner alive with laughter and music. Fiona rested her head against Travis's chest as they swayed. "Do you ever think," she whispered, "about how strange it is? That all this started because you shoveled a driveway." He chuckled softly. "I think about it every time I see snow." "We should tell that story at our anniversary every year," she said. He kissed the top of her head. "Only if I get to say the ending." She looked up. "And how does it end?" He smiled. "It doesn't. Not really. It just keeps getting better." Years later, the estate remained open to the public, a haven for artists, travelers, and dreamers. Fiona continued to run her foundation, though she'd stepped back from the high-rise boardrooms in favor of morning coffee on the veranda and long walks with Harper down the woodland paths. Travis started a company that specialized in restoring historical properties, using the estate as his flagship project. He employed veterans, single parents, and people who needed a second chance just like he once had. They lived in the West Wing, a private space carved from the once crumbling quarters, now filled with warmth, color, and family. Harper grew fiercely and freely, her world shaped not by limits, but by love. And every winter, when the snow returned and blanketed the land, Travis would take Fiona's hand and lead her out to the front steps, just like that first day. He never brought a shovel again, because this time they weren't digging their way out. They were already home.